Captain Vex stood frozen at the bridge view screen, mandibles clicking in what his crew recognized as extreme distress. The blue-green planet hanging before them had been classified as a Class 13 death world by the Galactic Surveyor Corps over 3 centuries ago. No one had bothered to check it since. Why would they? Class 13 meant certain death for most spacefaring species. "Run the atmospheric analysis again," Vex ordered, his secondary eyes blinking rapidly. Science Officer Trell's tentacles danced across the control panel. "Confirmed, Captain. Oxygen levels at 21%, nitrogen at 78%. The mixture alone would be toxic to half the Confederation species." "And that's just the air," muttered Security Chief Dorvan, his crystalline exoskeleton glinting under the bridge lights. "The gravity readings are 9.8 meters per second squared. That's nearly double what most species evolved under." Vex's sensory stalks quivered. "What about the indigenous life forms?" The view screen shifted to display an assortment of Earth creatures. Massive predators with razor teeth, diminutive insects with deadly venom, microscopic pathogens capable of decimating entire populations. "Life forms present on all continents and in all oceans," Trell reported. "Apex predators on land, sea, and air, and the dominant species." The screen shifted again, displaying humans going about their daily lives. They call themselves humans. Bipedal mammals with remarkable endurance and adaptability. "They don't look particularly threatening," Vex observed. "That's where you're wrong," interjected Mira, their xenobiologist. Unlike the others, she was a rare Class 11 native herself, making her uniquely suited for this mission. "They evolved in one of the most competitive ecosystems in the known galaxy. Their ancestors survived by outlasting prey in endurance hunts under a blazing sun." Vex turned all 4 eyes toward her. "Elaborate." "Most species would sprint to catch prey or escape predators. Humans? They would simply keep running. For hours, days even. They'd follow their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion, then make the kill." Mira pulled up comparative physiological charts. "They have specialized sweat glands covering their entire bodies, allowing them to regulate temperature efficiently. They can shed heat while continuing to move. Most species in the galaxy would overheat and die attempting what humans consider a recreational activity." "Recreational?" Chief Engineer Gorn asked, scales bristling. "They run marathons." "For fun." Mira emphasized the last word with a gesture of disbelief. "Over 42 kilometers in a single effort." The bridge fell silent as the crew processed this information. "There's more," Mira continued. "Their visual processing works primarily in the visible light spectrum, but with remarkable pattern recognition. Their hearing range is limited, but incredibly precise for detecting predators. And their social structures," she paused. "They form complex bonds not just within family units, but across vast communities. They can coordinate actions across millions of individuals. So they're pack hunters, but at a planetary scale," Security Chief Dorvan summarized grimly. "That's not even considering their technological progression," added Trell. "In just 3 centuries since our last survey, they've gone from primitive combustion engines to rudimentary space exploration. The rate of advancement is concerning." Captain Vex approached the view screen, studying the blue planet with new apprehension. "The Confederation categorized this as a Class 13 death world, based on environmental factors alone. But if we factor in the dominant species' capabilities, that's why we're here, Captain," Mira said quietly. "The Oversight Committee suspects Earth may be pushing into Class 14 territory. We need confirmation before they authorize a containment. Protocol." Vex's mandibles clicked once more. "To think all these centuries we've been avoiding this system as a natural hazard. We never considered the possibility that the real threat would be its inhabitants." "Should we proceed with the covert landing?" asked Dorvan. Vex stared at the planet where billions of potential Class 14 organisms went about their lives, oblivious to their classification in the galactic order. "Yes," he decided, "but with extreme caution. If humans truly are pushing into Class 14 territory, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with." The observation team's shuttle touched down in a remote forest clearing under the cover of night. Earth's heavy gravity immediately pressed down on the 4 crew members as they exited the craft. Atmospheric filters functioning at optimal levels, reported Trell, checking the readouts on his environment suit. Though I must say, breathing here feels like drowning in soup. The density will take some getting used to, Mira agreed, already more comfortable than her companions due to her Class 11 physiology. Remember, we're here to observe only. No contact with the indigenous population. Their mission was simple: gather first-hand data on human capabilities to determine if Earth required reclassification. The Confederation's containment protocols for Class 14 worlds were severe: complete isolation, permanent monitoring stations, and if necessary, more drastic measures. The team moved through the forest toward the nearest human settlement, a small town according to their scans. Every step was laborious in Earth's crushing gravity. Every sound, rustling leaves, distant animal calls put them on edge. I'm detecting electromagnetic emissions consistent with their communication technology, Dorvan said, consulting his scanner. Primitive by our standards, but remarkably advanced for a species that discovered electricity less than 3 centuries ago. Mira nodded. Their technological progression curve is nearly vertical, from basic flight to landing on their moon in less than 70 years, from rudimentary computing to global information networks in 50. They reached the edge of the forest, where they could observe the town from a safe distance. Lights shimmered in the darkness, and occasional vehicles moved along paved roads. Let's set up the monitoring equipment here, Vex instructed. We'll gather data for a full planetary rotation before moving closer. As they worked, a distant thunder rumbled across the sky. Trell's sensory appendages twitched anxiously. Weather event approaching, he warned. My instruments are detecting severe electrical activity. A simple thunderstorm, Mira explained. Common on Earth, especially in this region. The storm arrived with surprising speed and ferocity. Rain lashed down in heavy sheets, and lightning split the dark sky in brilliant flashes. Thunder boomed with such force that it rattled their equipment. This isn't a simple anything, Dorvan shouted over the cacophony. The electrical discharges alone could fry our systems. Earth's weather patterns are extreme by Confederation standards, Mira acknowledged. The planet's axial tilt and rotation speed create complex atmospheric conditions. As they huddled beneath the meager shelter of the trees, Vex noticed movement in the town below. Despite the dangerous conditions, humans were still active, securing loose objects, checking drainage systems, continuing with their evening activities under protective gear. They're just ignoring the storm? Gorn asked incredulously. Adapting to it, Mira corrected. Earth throws constant survival challenges at them: extreme weather, natural disasters, disease outbreaks. They've evolved, not just to survive these conditions, but to thrive despite them. A particularly violent lightning strike hit a tree barely 50 meters from their position. The resulting explosion of wood and bark sent fragments flying in all directions. We need to relocate, Vex decided, gathering his equipment. This observation point is too exposed. As they retreated deeper into the forest, Trell reviewed the preliminary data they'd collected. Captain, these readings are unprecedented. The microbiological diversity alone is staggering. There are billions of bacteria just in a handful of soil, most of which would be lethal to Confederation species without proper protection, added Mira. Humans don't just survive here. Their bodies host entire ecosystems of these microorganisms in symbiotic relationships. Captain Vex paused, looking back at the town weathering the storm. So they're not merely adapted to a Class 13 environment. They're fundamentally integrated with it. Precisely, Mira said grimly. And that integration makes them far more dangerous than we initially calculated. They don't just endure these conditions, they harness them. The implications hung heavy, in the rain-soaked air. If humans could master such a hostile environment, what would happen when they eventually reached the stars? Morning broke over the small Earth town, revealing a landscape transformed by the storm. Felled trees, flooded streets, and scattered debris testified to the night's violence. Yet human activity resumed with remarkable speed. Look at them. Dorvan marveled, observing through high-powered optics. They've already begun repairs. No centralized coordination, minimal communication. They just know what needs doing. The observation team had relocated to an abandoned structure on the outskirts of town. A barn, according to their cultural database. The wooden building provided shelter and a vantage point while their shuttle underwent repairs from storm damage. Their resilience is unprecedented, Trell noted, analyzing biometric readings. Their stress responses should be elevated after such an event, yet most individuals show normal hormone levels. It's as if they're accustomed to constant crisis. They are, Mira confirmed. Earth has shaped humans through relentless environmental pressure. What we consider catastrophic, they call Tuesday. Captain Vex had been uncharacteristically quiet, studying the data streams with growing concern. I've been comparing our observations with the original Class 13 designation parameters, he finally said. The classification was based primarily on environmental factors, but we failed to account for how those factors would influence evolution. What are you suggesting, Captain? Gorn asked. I'm suggesting that the Death World classification system may be fundamentally flawed, Vex replied. We assumed that extreme conditions would limit evolutionary potential. Instead, they've accelerated it. A commotion in the town drew their attention. A building had caught fire, perhaps from damaged electrical systems. The response was immediate. Specialized vehicles arrived, humans in protective gear deployed, with practiced efficiency, and the situation was contained within minutes. Did you see that? Trell's voice held unmistakable awe. They ran toward the danger. Their emergency response protocols are impressive, Dorvan acknowledged reluctantly. It's more than that, Mira said. They've institutionalized altruism. Some humans dedicate their lives to rushing into situations that their own survival instincts should make them flee. Vex's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. A species-wide survival strategy. The group protects itself by training specialized members to combat threats even at personal risk. Not just training, Mira corrected. There's a cultural component. They celebrate these behaviors. They've turned evolutionary disadvantages into virtues. As they watched, a small group of humans began clearing debris from an elderly neighbor's property. No apparent reward, no obligation beyond social bonds. This complicates our assessment, Vex admitted. Class 14 designation typically indicates a species that presents an existential threat to galactic civilization. These humans are dangerous. Yes, but they're also... He struggled to find the appropriate term. Compassionate, Mira supplied. Their harsh environment hasn't made them merely brutal survivors. It's forged a complex moral framework. Trell's sensors suddenly alerted. Captain, I'm detecting approach vehicles. Multiple human life signs. The team tensed as 3 primitive ground vehicles pulled up near their hidden observation post. Have we been discovered? Dorvan reached for his defensive equipment. Negative, Trell replied. They appear to be conducting their own survey. The storm damage, perhaps. Through careful observation, they watched as humans meticulously documented the area, taking soil samples and photographs. Scientists, by all appearances. Their curiosity matches their resilience, Mira observed. Earth constantly tries to kill them, yet they study it with passionate intensity. A dangerous combination, murmured Vex. Physical adaptability, technological advancement, social cohesion, and insatiable curiosity. If they ever reach deep space, the implication hung in the air, unspoken but understood by all. A Class 14 designation wouldn't just mean containment. For truly dangerous species, the Confederation had more permanent solutions. As the human researchers departed, Vex made a decision. We need more data. Not just about their physical capabilities, but their social structures, their value systems. We cannot make a proper assessment without understanding what drives them. Are you suggesting we infiltrate their society? Dorvan asked, alarmed. The contamination risks are considerable, Vex finished. But the stakes are too high for remote observation alone. Mira, you're best adapted for close contact. How? Quickly, can you modify your appearance to pass as human? Mira's expression was grim. A few hours of genetic resequencing should suffice. But Captain, if I'm discovered, then we'll learn firsthand just how dangerous humans really are, Vex replied solemnly. Mira walked among humans, a stranger hiding in plain sight. Her genetically resequenced body approximated human appearance well enough to avoid casual detection, though she kept interactions brief. The town's central gathering area, a park, according to their databases, offered an ideal observation point. Subject displays remarkable heterogeneity, she subvocalized, her words transmitted directly to the team's hidden base. Visible differences in height, mass, pigmentation, yet all functioning within cohesive social groups. Captain Vex's voice responded through her auditory implant. Any signs of hierarchical structures? Dominant individuals? Multiple simultaneous hierarchies, Mira replied, watching children play while adults supervised. Age-based, achievement-based, and what appears to be informal social standing, but they're fluid, contextual. A leader in one setting becomes a follower in another. She continued her circuit through the park, past humans engaged in various activities. Some performed physical exertions that seemed purely recreational, running laps around a paved track, lifting weighted objects repeatedly. They deliberately stress their biological systems to induce adaptation, she noted with fascination. Voluntary suffering for future benefit. Classic Death World evolutionary strategy, commented Trell through the comm. But self-imposed rather than environmentally mandated. Mira paused near a small gathering where humans were sharing prepared food. The biochemical compounds would be toxic to most Confederation species, but the humans consumed them with obvious pleasure. Their digestive systems are remarkable, she observed. They not only tolerate but enjoy substances that would kill most sentient species. And they've ritualized consumption into social bonding experiences. As she watched, a small human child stumbled and fell nearby. The reaction was immediate, not just from the presumed parent, but from several unrelated adults who moved to assist before determining the child wasn't seriously injured. Communal protection of offspring, Mira noted. Expected, but the speed and universality of the response is noteworthy. She was about to move on when a new sound cut through the ambient noise, a high-pitched alarm from a nearby structure. The human response was immediate and disciplined. Adults gathered children, moved with purpose rather than panic, and evacuated the area with practiced efficiency. Emergency response protocols appear to be culturally ingrained, Mira reported, following at a safe distance. Even juveniles understand procedural expectations. The source of the alarm became apparent as uniformed humans directed the evacuation. A structural fire in one of the community buildings. Specialized response vehicles arrived, and humans in protective gear entered the dangerous environment without hesitation. Deliberate counter-survival behavior, Dorvan's voice observed through the comm. They risk individual mortality to preserve collective resources, not just resources, Mira corrected, watching as the emergency responders emerged carrying an elderly human. They prioritized life preservation above infrastructure. The fire was contained quickly, the injured treated with impressive medical competence. Mira observed it all with growing unease. Captain, I'm revising my initial assessment, she said quietly, moving away from the crowd. These humans aren't simply adapted to their death world. They've transcended it. They've taken evolutionary pressures that should produce solitary, aggressive survivors, and instead developed cooperative strategies that magnify their effectiveness. Explain, Vex prompted. Most Class 13 native species achieve dominance through individual strength or specialized biological advantages. Humans have minimal natural weapons, no exceptional sensory capabilities. Instead, they've weaponized cooperation itself. Mira watched as the community reorganized around the emergency, providing support to the affected. They've developed cultural systems that allow them to functionally operate as a superorganism when necessary. The implications silence the communication channel momentarily. If they apply these strategies to interstellar expansion, Trell finally ventured. Exactly. Mira confirmed. A species with their adaptive capabilities, technological progression rate, and cooperative efficiency would be unstoppable, Vex finished grimly. As darkness fell, Mira prepared to return to the team's hidden base. Her path took her past a small gathering where humans were producing patterned sounds, music, their database called it. She paused, struck by the haunting melody. Here was something unexpected, beauty created from mathematical precision and emotional resonance. The humans swayed together, voices joining in collective expression. "There's something else," she transmitted quietly. "Something the classification system doesn't account for. They create art, music, stories, patterns without obvious survival benefit. They allocate precious resources to beauty." Captain Vex's response was slow in coming. "Return to base, Mira. I believe we have sufficient data for preliminary conclusions." As she slipped away from the human settlement, Mira couldn't help but wonder if they truly did understand what they were observing, or whether humanity operated on principles the Confederation had yet to discover. The observation team gathered in their hidden base, surrounded by holographic displays of the data they'd collected. After 3 Earth days of surveillance, the picture emerging was increasingly complex and increasingly concerning. The physiological adaptations alone would justify a Class 13 designation, Trell began, highlighting comparative charts. Their musculoskeletal system is robust by Confederation standards. They can sustain fractures that would be fatal to most species and recover fully. Their blood-clotting mechanisms are extraordinarily efficient. More concerning is their environmental flexibility, added Gorn. Humans survive in temperature ranges from -40 to +50 degrees on their Celsius scale. They inhabit everything from Arctic regions to deserts to high-altitude mountains. Some populations have specific adaptations for low oxygen environments or increased UV radiation exposure. Captain Vex studied the displays with his 4 eyes, mandibles working thoughtfully. Yet their most dangerous adaptations aren't physical. Agreed, Mira said, bringing up new displays. Their social structures are unlike anything in the Confederation database. Most species with aggressive survival traits develop rigid hierarchies. Humans have created flexible, adaptive systems that can reorganize almost instantly in response to threats. Dorvin, who had been monitoring Earth's information networks, added his perspective. Their communications technology exceeds expectations for their development stage. They've created global information exchange systems that allow knowledge to propagate across their entire species nearly instantaneously. And they use it for... Vex gestured at the display showing human entertainment content. Everything, Dorvin confirmed. Critical survival information, yes, but also art, trivial social interactions, mating rituals, philosophical debates. They seem incapable of distinguishing between essential and non-essential information. Or perhaps they consider it all essential in different ways, Mira suggested. That may be their most dangerous trait. They don't optimize solely for survival. They pursue knowledge for its own sake. The captain's sensory stalks quivered slightly. The classification question remains. Does Earth warrant Class 14 designation? Silence fell as each considered the implications. Class 14 worlds were subject to the most stringent containment protocols in Confederation law. Some extremists even advocated for preemptive neutralization of such threats. Their technology hasn't reached interstellar capability yet, Gorn noted hopefully. We have time before direct contact becomes inevitable. Less than you might think, Trell countered, displaying a timeline of human technological advancement. Their progression isn't linear, it's exponential. Based on current rates, they could achieve basic interstellar travel within a century, possibly sooner. And they show no signs of self-destruction despite their aggressive tendencies, added Dorvin. Most species with their conflict patterns annihilate themselves before achieving space travel. These humans channel their aggression into competitive advancement. Vex turned to Mira. You've had the closest contact. Your assessment? Mira hesitated, organizing her thoughts. They're dangerous, certainly. Their adaptability makes them unpredictable. Their curiosity makes them expansionist by nature. But she paused, struggling with concepts that had no precise analogues in Confederation thinking. They surprise me. They value individual lives to an extent that seems counterproductive. From an evolutionary perspective, they make decisions based on abstract principles rather than immediate survival advantage. Meaning? Vex prompted. Meaning, I don't know if our classification system accounts for what they are, Mira admitted. They're simultaneously more dangerous and more principled than any Class 13 species we've encountered. A sudden alert interrupted their discussion. Dorvin rushed to the monitoring equipment, crystalline exoskeleton glinting anxiously. "Captain, we have a problem," he reported. "Human. Security forces are converging on this area. Their pattern suggests a deliberate search, not routine patrol." "Have we been detected?" Vex demanded. "Unclear, but probable. Their electromagnetic scanning technology is more sophisticated than our intelligence suggested." The captain made an immediate decision. "Prepare for emergency extraction. Secure all evidence of our presence." As the team hurriedly packed their equipment, Mira studied the approaching human vehicles on the monitor. "They're not deploying weapons," she observed. "Their approach pattern suggests caution rather than aggression. Nevertheless, we cannot risk contact," Vex insisted. "The Confederation Council must evaluate our findings before any official first contact scenario." As the extraction countdown began, Mira found herself torn by conflicting reactions. The scientific part of her thrilled at the discovery of such a unique species. The survivalist in her trembled at their potential threat. The question remained: Class 13, Death World, or something unprecedented? The extraction went smoothly until it didn't. Their shuttle lifted off under cover of darkness, cloaking systems engaged, when human military aircraft suddenly converged from multiple directions. "Impossible," Trell exclaimed, monitoring the tactical display. "They shouldn't have the technology to track us." And yet, Captain Vex observed grimly as the primitive Earth aircraft maintained pursuit despite their evasive maneuvers. "They adapt quickly. Gorn, status of our engines?" The engineer's scales rippled with agitation. "Functioning at 87% capacity, Captain. Earth's gravity well requires more power than anticipated for clean escape." On the view screens, the human aircraft kept pace, neither firing weapons nor attempting communication, just following. "They're studying us," Mira realized, "learning our capabilities before engaging." A warning light flashed on the control panel. Dorvin hissed in alarm. "Energy," Spike detected. "They're attempting to scan our internal systems." "Shields holding?" Vex demanded. "Yes, but these aren't standard scanning frequencies. They're trying different approaches. Experimental patterns. If they get lucky." A sudden jolt rocked the shuttle. Status indicators flashed from green to amber across the board. "Direct hit," Gorn reported, stunned. "Primitive projectile weapon, but they targeted precisely where our right stabilizer connects to the hull." "Lucky shot," Trell suggested hopefully. "Statistical improbability," the engineer replied. "They observed our maneuvering pattern and identified a structural weakness." Captain Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of intense calculation. "Time. To reach minimum safe distance for FTL jump?" 3 minutes, 17 seconds, Gorn answered, assuming no further damage. Another impact shuddered through the craft. More warning lights. "Communication systems compromised," reported Dorvin. "They're not trying to destroy us. They're deliberately disabling specific systems." Vex stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Against all probability, these Class 13 organisms with their primitive technology were systematically crippling a spacecraft centuries beyond their development level. "Options?" he demanded. "We could deploy countermeasures," suggested Dorvin. "The electromagnetic pulse would disable their aircraft. And potentially all technology in a 50-kilometer radius," added Trell, "including their medical facilities and essential infrastructure." Vex's sensory stalks quivered with indecision. Confederation protocols were clear: prevent contamination at all costs. But those protocols assumed primitive species would be incapable of forcing such a choice. "No," he decided. "We will not harm them to escape. Divert power from weapons to shields and engines. Gorn, plot an alternative escape vector. As the engineer worked, the shuttle rocked with another precise hit. Primary propulsion damaged, Gorn reported. FTL capability compromised. We can still achieve escape velocity, but our range will be limited to this solar system. Unacceptable, Vex replied. We cannot risk the shuttle being captured and reverse-engineered. The implications hung heavy in the cockpit. If they couldn't escape with their vessel, standard protocol demanded its destruction, along with all aboard. There's another option, Mira said quietly. I can attempt communication. Absolutely not, Dorvan objected. First contact protocols require extensive preparation, diplomatic. They've already made contact, Mira interrupted, gesturing at the pursuing aircraft. They know we exist. The question now is what narrative forms in their minds. Mysterious aliens who self-destruct rather than communicate? Or potentially peaceful visitors? Another hit. The shuttle's stabilizers whined as they struggled to compensate. Engine failure imminent, Gorn warned. Decision required, Captain. Vex stared at the blue-green planet below them, mind racing through scenarios and protocols. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this. A supposedly primitive species demonstrating the tactical acumen to disable a Confederation vessel. Open a communication channel, he finally ordered. Visual only, standard translation protocols. Mira quickly established the connection, broadcasting on frequencies the humans would recognize. The response was almost instantaneous. Their pursuers ceased fire and maintained formation around the damaged shuttle. After a tense moment, the shuttle's communication system crackled to life. A human voice, translated by their systems, spoke, with remarkable calm. Unidentified craft. This is General Alan Roberts of Earth United Defense. You are in restricted airspace and have been disabled for security purposes. State your identity and intentions. Captain Vex looked at his crew, seeing his own shock reflected in their expressions. These humans weren't panicking at first contact. They were treating it as a security operation. This changes everything, he said quietly, before activating the response channel. General Roberts, I am Captain Vex of the Confederation survey vessel Horizon. We come in peace conducting standard evaluation of your world. The human response came quickly. Captain Vex, we've been tracking your observation team since your arrival. We request you land your vessel at the following coordinates for diplomatic discussions. As Gorn received the landing details, Vex turned to his crew. The Confederation Council will not be pleased. The classification question just answered itself, Mira observed. Any species that can force first contact on their terms is unquestionably Class 14. Vex finished grimly. The diplomatic chamber was a hastily converted aircraft hangar on a military base. Captain Vex and Mira, as the most humanoid team member, sat across from 3 human representatives. General Roberts, a civilian scientist named Dr. Ellis, and a government official introduced as Director Mason. The humans showed remarkable composure considering the circumstances. No visible fear, no aggressive posturing, just intense curiosity barely contained behind professional demeanors. Let me ensure I understand correctly, Director Mason said, consulting his notes. Your Confederation designates planets on a classification scale based on habitability and danger level. Earth was previously classified as Class 13? Correct? Vex confirmed. A death world category indicating extreme environmental conditions hostile to most sentient life forms. Dr. Ellis leaned forward, eyes bright with scientific interest. And this classification was made solely on environmental factors. Gravity, atmospheric composition, biodiversity. Initially, yes, Mira explained. The original survey 3 centuries ago cataloged Earth as an interesting evolutionary laboratory but too dangerous for regular contact. You've been watching us for 300 years? General Roberts asked sharply. No, Vex clarified. That would be a waste of resources. Your world was classified, marked in navigational charts as hazardous and essentially forgotten until recent developments triggered a reassessment. What developments? Director Mason inquired. Captain Vex and Mira exchanged glances. This was the delicate part. Your technological progression rate, Mira finally answered, particularly in computational systems, materials science, and aerospace. The acceleration curve exceeded predictions by several factors. You were concerned we might become a threat, General Roberts stated flatly. It wasn't a question. The Confederation monitors potentially expansionist species, Vex acknowledged, carefully. History has taught us that some civilizations expand aggressively. Dr. Ellis raised an eyebrow. And your solution would have been? Containment protocols, Mira said before Vex could formulate a diplomatic response. Monitoring stations, navigational hazard warnings to divert traffic from your system, possibly more active measures if deemed necessary. The humans processed this in silence for a moment. And now, Director Mason finally asked, your ship is disabled. Your presence is known to our governments, though not yet to the general population. What happens next? It was the question Vex had been dreading since their forced landing. Confederation protocols for this scenario were clear, and clearly inadequate. That depends, he replied cautiously, on you. General Roberts leaned back in his chair. You're afraid of us. With reason, Mira pointed out. You disabled an interstellar craft with technology centuries beyond your development level, using primitive projectile weapons and clever tactics. Adaptability, Dr. Ellis nodded. Working with what we have. It's how we survived this death world of ours. And now you're considering reclassifying Earth to Class 14? Director Mason asked. Which means a designation reserved for existential threats to galactic civilization, Vex explained. Species with both the capability and temperament to engage in aggressive expansion. The humans exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. You misjudge us, Dr. Ellis said finally. Yes, we can be aggressive when threatened. Yes, we adapt and overcome obstacles with remarkable speed. But have you considered that perhaps these traits evolved not to dominate others, but simply to survive here? A predator is a predator, Dorvan had argued during their pre-meeting briefing. But looking at these humans now, Vex wasn't so certain. Our assessment team observed remarkable cooperative behaviors, Mira acknowledged. Altruism, resource sharing, protection of the vulnerable. These aren't typical traits of aggressively expansionist species. Because your classification system is flawed, Dr. Ellis suggested gently. It assumes that evolutionary pressure creates either victims or victimizers. Earth taught us a third path, partnership. She pushed forward a tablet displaying images of human history, figures helping each other through natural disasters, medical crises, conflicts. We survived this death world by working together, Director Mason added. And yes, sometimes by fighting. But the trajectory of our civilization has been toward greater cooperation, not greater conflict. General Roberts gestured toward the window, where the damaged shuttle was visible in the distance. We could have destroyed your vessel. Instead, we disabled it precisely enough to force communication. The question, Director Mason concluded, isn't whether humans are dangerous. We certainly can be. The question is what values guide that potential. Captain Vex considered this perspective, so alien to Confederation thinking, yet compelling in its logic. A species shaped by extreme conditions wouldn't necessarily become a threat to others. It might instead develop extraordinary capacities for both survival and cooperation. What do you propose? He finally asked. A new classification, Dr. Ellis suggested. Not Class 13 or 14, but something that acknowledges both our capacity for destruction and creation. And open diplomatic relations, not containment. The Confederation Council, Vex began. We'll need to adapt, Mira interrupted. Just as we're asking these humans to adapt to the knowledge that they're not alone in the universe. As the discussions continued into the night, Captain Vex realized that the humans were right about one thing. The classification system was fundamentally flawed. It had never accounted for a species that evolved under extreme pressure, yet channeled that evolutionary heritage toward cooperation rather than conquest. Earth wasn't simply a death world. It was an evolutionary crucible that had produced something the Confederation had never encountered before. A species that had taken the harsh lessons of survival and transformed them into principles of coexistence. Perhaps humanity wouldn't push the classification to Class 14 after all. Perhaps they would redefine it entirely. In the hangar-turned diplomatic chamber, humans and aliens continued their careful conversation, each word potentially reshaping the future of galactic relations. Outside, Earth continued its rotation, oblivious to its revised status in cosmic registries, no longer merely a death world, but a birthplace of unprecedented possibility. The end.